So this is going to be a lesson about left hand technique and how to create a safe and comfortable physical approach to the left hand. Now the way that we're going to do this is by thinking of what I call the neutral position. And now the neutral position is the body's most natural way of playing the bass guitar. And the way that we're going to find this neutral position is by holding our left hands out and letting them rest or being held up by the shoulder. And then have the entire rest of the arm, the forearm, the wrist, the hand, the fingers, etc., just go completely limp. Now what we're going to do is we're going to flip this whole thing over by 180 degrees. Now this is what I call the neutral position. And ideally, what we'd do is we'd just slot our bass in there, and then we'd have an ideal left-hand technique. Now, of course, there's a lot more to this, and I'm going to show you some important things about this position. One, the shoulder is really doing all the work in terms of holding all of this together. So the shoulder really can't be neglected. It's really part of the whole arm. Two, the elbow is in its most relaxed position necessarily bent with the forearm pointed upwards. It's somewhere best, it's most comfortable somewhere in between 30 degrees and 6 degrees being bent. Three, the wrist is not only relaxed, but it's flexible, but also it's pretty much straight. That's an important thing, very important thing to keep in mind, especially when you're trying to avoid repetitive stress injuries. Four, the fingers are all bent. All the joints and all of the fingers are necessarily going to be bent. They're not going to be bent extremely, and they're not going to be all straight out like that, but they're all bent. And it's also important to keep in mind that they're all, when they're bent, all of the tips of the fingers are kind of on the same plane. They're all pretty much on the same, you can see they're all on the same line. When they're all up like that, you can see, of course, they're all on different lengths, and it's kind of like a curved shape. But when they're bent, let's see if I can do it better. Well, I can't really do it from that way. They're all on the same line. Anyway, 5, the thumb is to the left of the index finger. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, and I'll show you exactly why. When a lot of us are first learning how to play bass and first learning the finger bass, people will say, okay, put your think of your first finger and your thumb as sort of a pincher, like that. Pinch them together. Or worse, the thumb and the middle finger, like that, or somewhere in between the two of them. Now, if you take that advice to heart and apply that to the entire bass, you get into some situations like this, for example, in the lower position. I'm thinking about putting my thumb right behind my middle finger. You get this position. Now, if I take that out, and then I compare it to the neutral position, there's a couple things that happen. One, you can see that the muscles in the upper arm and the forearm all tense up, and that tenses up on the elbow. Also what happens is that the wrist tenses up. It's now no longer flexible and relaxed, and it's straight. No longer straight. It's bent. So this is pretty much not what you want to happen. And all of this is messed up just because of your thumb moving a certain direction. Now, if you just let everything relax, everything in your entire arm feels a lot better, a lot more comfortable, and a lot relaxed. So you can see that taking this neutral position to heart in any aspect of your bass playing is really, really important, because anything that changes from that can affect the entire system. So anyway, let's look at the correct method of doing this. If we take our hand and we play in the first positions of the bass and apply the neutral position to this, we can see a couple things. First of all, the thumb is actually almost pointed towards the headstock, and that's something that not a lot of people teach, but it's still an important thing to keep in mind, because it really employs the neutral position in its most logical, natural way. If we flip around here, and of course the wrist is straight and relaxed. If we flip around here, we can see that the fingers are all bent, and we're also, because they're all bent, we're going to be playing the bass with the tips of our fingers. If we can't really play with the pads of our fingers, because if we're playing with the pads of our fingers, the fingers are necessarily going to be kind of straight and not relaxed, and that's, again, one of the many things that we need to take from the neutral positions, that the fingers are bent. Another thing that you'll notice is that the fingers are actually at a certain angle. They're at a 45-degree angle. They're not perfectly perpendicular to the strings. And if you're always thinking that they must be perpendicular to the strings and attack the strings at the same angle, that can lead to some problems in adjusting the neutral position. And you'll also notice that violinists, when they play, they employ the same sort of technique of having the fingers sort of facing almost the same directions as the strings. And when you're in the first positions down here, that's very important to keep in mind. So if we keep moving up and down the bass, down here, we'll see from the back end that the thumb is still pointed towards the headstock. The thumb is still to the left of the index finger. But now the fingers they don't need to be quite so bent at that angle. And they can now be perpendicular. So you can see as you're moving up and down the bass, in order to keep the natural position, or the neutral position, your fingers are changing angle. Cool. Alright, so now what about this top position of the bass, the upper positions? Now this is a position that can be very awkward, especially if you like to wear your bass low when you're standing up. Because when we're trying to employ the neutral position, we have the entire arm placed very close to the body. And that's not really ideal. We still want to have the elbow out a little bit. So what we're going to do is, one thing that I do is I'm going to either place my thumb instead of on the back of the neck, or middle of the back of the neck, like so many people will require you to do. I'm going to place it on the bottom of the neck, almost. And that way I can still get the freedom of range, freedom of motion that the neutral position affords me. And a lot of people, and myself included, will also completely take the thumb off the neck and let the side of the thumb rest on the bottom of the neck like this. And that really helps when you have a low strap length, or low strap height. And you can see that the thumb isn't really necessary for playing. When we're doing this, it's just nice to have something for the thumb to rest up against. And a lot of the problems with the upper position come from trying to figure out what to do with the thumb. So anyway, I hope this gave you some ideas for working with the neutral position. Really, you're going to need a teacher to really explore all the details with this, and they can stop you when you're doing something wrong and correct you and give you different ideas for working with this. But just to give that kernel of information, just to give that to you is important, because a lot of us will face injury further on down the line through poorly learned left-hand technique or right-hand technique. So hopefully you can work with this in some interesting and insightful ways for your own playing.